Welcome to the Shaw Consulting Podcast. In this episode, we're focusing on voice AI in social housing and what it could mean for service delivery, operational resilience, and regulatory confidence. Is voice AI simply an efficiency tool for contact centres, or does it represent a more fundamental shift in how social housing providers manage demand and engagement? Here to answer that question and a few more is Chris Shaw, MD of Shaw Consulting. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Stuart.
Well, thanks very much for joining us today, Chris. I'm sure we've got some really interesting questions that we're going to put to you. So, first one to start off is what do you actually mean by voice AI and how does it differ from the automated call systems social housing providers are used to?
So, when we talk about voice AI, we're referring to systems that can understand natural speech, interpret the intent, and respond conversationally, not just react to predefined menu options like you find in the traditional live.
Well, I think we've all been there, haven't we? When we've been phoning up the bank or whoever.
Yeah, no, that's it. And, as you know, those traditional IVRs are essentially just decision trees. Press 1 for repairs, press 2 for rent. They're rigid, they frustrate tenants, and ultimately they're not learning. So voice AI is different. It listens, it interprets, it acts. A tenant can say, my bathroom light's not working, I'm worried it's sparking. And the system understands the nuance, categorizes the repair correctly, extracts all the details, and even triages it. It's a shift from automation to understanding. And that's fundamentally why it's a step change.
Okay, that's a really good explanation of the difference between the two. And clearly, as you say, it's the understanding that makes that difference. I guess voice still remains the primary way tenants contact their landlord. So how can voice AI improve responsiveness and consistency? I think it's really important about losing that human element that social housing really relies on.
The key here is that voice AI doesn't replace that human engagement. It protects it.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that, Chris.
So by handling predictable transactional demand, voice AI frees up advisors to focus on conversations where empathy, judgment, and reassurance really matter, to the residents. It also reduces the inconsistency you naturally get when you have high staff turnover or inexperienced call handlers. The AI asks every tenant the same structured questions, captures the same critical details, and follows the same policy rules. So you get consistency in approach and you ensure compliance. I think more importantly, the AI must never operate in a vacuum. Every interaction needs clear, immediate escalation routes to humans whenever risk, vulnerability, or tenant distress is detected. And that's how you keep the human element exactly where it should be.
So we're not saying AI is taking over all call centres. It's almost a support function and ultimately be the human that actually has to deal with the more tested and difficult situations.
Yeah, that's it, definitely.
So we know contact centres are under sustained pressure from rising demand. I think you already touched on it, staff shortages, and tighter regulations. So where does voice AI deliver the biggest immediate operational benefits for social housing providers?
So I think there's 3 big wins straight away. One is that demand absorption, especially repairs. Repairs make up like 40 to 60% of incoming calls for many landlords. So voice AI can take full repair reports accurately any time of the day and book them directly into the scheduling system. And that instantly releases capacity. 2, reduction in unavoidable repeat contacts. So when data capture becomes uniform and complete, planners stop having to call tenants back to clarify details. Jobs get raised correctly the first time, and that failure demand drops. And then 3, that workforce resilience. So recruiting and retaining contact center staff remains difficult across the sector. Voice AI provides a scalable floor on your operational capability. It don't go off sick. It don't get tired. It doesn't need training budgets, and it doesn't churn. So these benefits show up in weeks, not months.
Okay, thanks for that, Chris. There's probably a load of questions around that in terms of how staff are treated, but that's probably for another podcast. I think let's just move it on slightly, I think. So, first of all, it's that context as you talked about with the tenants. But from a regulatory and governance perspective, what advantage does AI offer around, say, audit trails, compliance and assurance, particularly in areas like repairs, damp and mold and safety checks?
I think regulators are increasingly wanting evidence, not assurance, and voice AI excels in evidence generation. So, first, every interaction is fully transcribed, and you have a verbatim, time-stamped, auditable record of what the tenant reported and how the organization responded. Second, because voice AI follows structured questioning, you eliminate that variability that leads to compliance gaps. For example, failing to ask about a vulnerability, the presence of damp, or access constraints to the property. And third, it strengthens the golden thread. When the AI categorizes a repair or a safety concern, that data flows straight into the case management systems, meaning nothing relies on manual input. So in areas like damp and mold, which are now high risk regulatory topics, this level of accuracy and auditability provides far stronger assurance to boards and committees.
It seems it gives that overall transparency that the regulator's looking for. And I guess from what you're saying, most of this is available at a touch of a button.
Yeah, it is. And yeah, it's definitely how I see it.
Okay, let's just look at some of the key risks and pitfalls for any social housing provider when they're looking at this. What do they need to be aware of when adopting voice AI, including things like data quality, safeguarding, and tenant trust?
The risks aren't necessarily technical, they're organizational. So, number one, poor data and process hygiene. If your repair categories are wrong, if your scripting is out of date, or if your escalation rules are unclear, the voice AI agent will just amplify those issues. It forces you to tidy up your house before deployment. Number two, weak escalation design. So, like we mentioned earlier, AI must never be a blocker when somebody needs to speak to a human. So, understanding those safeguarding cues, distress, health and safety issues, these should trigger immediate handover to, an advisor. Three, over optimism about tenant adoption. Some tenants will love it, some won't trust it initially. So clear communication is vital. We need to be transparent. We need to be reassuring. We need to give tenants a choice. Four, governance gaps. Leaders need to set the guardrails around bias, data retention, error rates, and continuous monitoring. Treat voice AI like any other critical system. Audit it, review it, and own it. Get these foundations right, and the risk profile becomes very manageable.
Okay, that seems like a few things that leaders need to consider. Cultural change, that trust. I think we all feel like that about AI and how we can trust it going forward. I think that'll be really interesting to see how that sort of develops once these systems make the way into the social housing sector. So, just finally, Chris, for organizations considering voice AI, what does a sensible starting point look like? And how should teams approach pilots and getting ready for it?
I think the key here is, start small, but start in the right place. Pick a narrow, high volume journey, typically repairs reporting, and run a tightly defined pilot with clear success measures, accuracy, call handling time, tenant satisfaction, and impact on contact center load. Prepare the organization, not just the technology. And what I mean by that is cleansing the repair categories and the scripting, training staff on how the AI works and when it escalates, setting governance rules, engaging with tenants early, and finally, treat it as a strategic capability and not just a gadget. Voice AI isn't just a channel shift project. It's the beginning of conversational automation across your organization. Executive teams need to embrace this early. They need to build more resilience. They need to ensure that compliant, and they need to make it tenant centric, as part of their operating model moving forward.
I think what you're saying there, Chris, is this is just the start of something a lot bigger. So consider it very carefully and get it right at the beginning.
Yeah, that's it.
I think that's a perfect point to sort of wrap this episode of the Shaw Consulting podcast up. Thanks very much, Chris.
Thanks, Stuart.
As always, organisations wanting support can contact Chris via LinkedIn or the website. So again, thanks for listening and watch out for more Shaw podcasts coming soon. Thank you.